leave the stage now. We're going to move on to the closing of the session, but there's a little tiny thing we want to do in between. So if Britta and Jenny could join us very shortly on stage. I'll hand back over to Jasmin.
Please, here. We talked about the human aspect, and we had 3 core values, and I think one core value is also thankfulness. But not thankfulness to the shiny ones here on stage, but a big thank to the one that let us shine, and these are the project coordination team, which is Britta Lerch and Jenny Müller, who rocked this project for 4 years. People are leaving, people are coming, but 2 ones sticked and had to deal with Excel sheets, smart sheet, with the European Commission, changing rules, whatever. They had to deal with a lot, and with us. So a big applause for the team. And I think all partners and all institutions want to thank you.
That's not on. I just think our partners just don't want me to speak because I'm very emotional right now. Thank you so much. And it's a really great pleasure to work with this amazing team. Unfortunately, you talked a lot about the things that I actually will mention in my closing notes. So, dear audience, if you would like to stick around and listen to that as well, I would really appreciate that. But it's also a testament that even we're so different, that I think the impressions we received from this project and working together are very, very similar. Not only on the operation level and all the partners who are doing the work on their local organizations, but also from us as the project management team. I think we can agree that we are all very, very different in how we work, but I think at the heart we are very, very similar, and I'm very thankful for that. Thanks.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So, Britta, you're going to stay around on stage. Do you want to ditch the flowers for a second? Yasmin's also going to stay with us.
Okay.
Shortly, and Kurt, if you'd also like to come and join us as the 3 initiators of the Smart Places. Kurt, are you there? There you are.
Yes, you can.
And I'll hand over to Britta now. Shall I take care of your flowers? You're welcome. Ja, I'll pay.
Give me like 5 more seconds to collect myself. Yes, good evening. Thank you for staying. No one left, that's a good sign. I'm Britta Lerch. I'm the overall project coordinator for Smart Places, working with the Dortmunder U. And I think you already, that's why I'm still smiling, had such great impressions from our partners on their perspectives, experiences, lessons they learned. And I think you already also got a glimpse of how honest we all work together in this project. And I think this will make this project so special. So I have to disappoint you if you expected a closing note that gives you a list of measurable indicators or visitor numbers or a rundown of all our best practice examples. I will not do that. Because I don't think that these are the right indicators to define what the real value of Smart Places was for each and every one of us. So what I would rather talk about is the culture of this project and its own story of transformation. We heard this a lot today, but Smart Places was really a very, very human experience. Since 2016, we have completed almost 60 different sub-projects. We tested and applied new strategies to audience engagement, capacity management, and became better storytellers. But most importantly, and I think the last 4 years reflect the conferency. You see here. It's the essence of how we worked, how we collaborated and learned from each other. Working with this amazing team had, however, many facets. I think the most human and, to be honest, most crucial experience we made was trying to attempt to match the different perspectives. A good example is the development process of our mobile app. When we initially defined a museum app as one of the outcomes of this project in the grant application, everyone nodded and agreed, yes, let's do a museum app. Keep in mind, that was 2014, you know, that was a really, really hot thing to do. But the real work on matching perspectives begins after the funding is granted and the real development process starts. And then the discussion starts. And truly, we get along very well, but we have a lot of discussions. Is an app a marketing tool? Is it a tool for cultural mediation? Is it a curated virtual exhibition space? Or is it simply a content container? Shall it be educational or playful or both? These discussions can be endless, and suddenly you have a lot of different opinions and perspectives that become hard or even impossible to match. The same realization process applies to the perceived value of this project. If you ask any of our partners here in the room, and the ones who can't attend today, what smARTplaces is for them and their organization, you will receive 9 different answers, probably more. If you ask them before and after a meeting, it's probably be 18. This is because when we started this project, each organization had their own unique vision of audience engagement and the role of digital for the purpose of engaging their local audiences. And all of them still have. Luckily, there was one common ground that we all agreed upon, that we all face similar challenges, excuse me, that we all face similar challenges and need to start a digital transformation process in order to engage these new audiences, and that we have to re-evaluate our practices. But here was our first misconception from the application process. At the beginning, we thought that maybe we could find a one-fits-all solution for our digital struggles, one that could be standardized and easily replicated across the different institutions. Quickly we realized standardization will make this project fail. So we rewrote the initial concept. We went back to the drawing board for many, many hours and nights, with a lot of meetings attached to that as well. And we gave ourselves the flexibility to change scopes during the development process of each and every single activity, to the extent possible. Roles and responsibilities were adjusted, the scope of activities reevaluated, and sometimes with the need to scale them down or even drop them. That happens in a project of this scale. And to be honest, this was sometimes a very exhausting process, but it was the best that could happen to this project. smARTplaces became an experiment, providing a safe environment for each and every one of us to develop, test, and assess the effectiveness and acceptance of different forms of digital technology entire to local practice. And so matching the different perspectives among the partners ultimately wasn't the key point of this project anymore. Matching the opportunities with each local identity was. And with that, we had to let go of a lot of preconceptions about project work and making sense of it. I'm sorry. All project managers agreed, and we heard that before as well during our partner talk, agreed that the technology itself cannot be the leader of change. It's just an enabling factor that can enrich visitor experiences in multiple ways. The leader of change, however, are always the people involved. At smARTplaces, we experienced a knowledge drain due to team members seeking new challenges. During the time span of 4 years, 10 key team members left the organizations and therefore the project. With a core team of 25 people, you can do the math. It's a normal occurrence, but we didn't anticipate that it will happen on this scale. And suddenly, as a project coordinator, you lose your project ambassadors, your local ambassadors, the ones that can best explain the project and its ambitions to the team members on a local scale. Dealing with these sudden changes requires the ability to adapt and letting go of initial ideas. And a lot of times we had to start over from scratch. For my colleagues who already worked on the project from 2014 on, the complex scope of this project, they were really aware of it from the beginning on. We were introducing new methods that could be tested on existing formats or internal processes, and by that contribute to the digital transformation of our organizations. For new members, however, who joined the project later, last year or the year before, the first impressions of the projects were kind of overwhelming ones. My colleagues, Jasmin and Jenny, and I spent hours working, introducing the concepts and workflows of smARTplaces again and again, and we had to realize just because it was clear to us didn't mean that everyone else had the same understanding of the project. When they would first join the project or join us in one of our steering group meetings, it was all you could see in their faces were a lot of question marks, a lot of question marks. But what I noticed in observing them after 1 week of meeting was that they left our discussions and workshops and group meetings, and suddenly the impression changed, and it more became an impression of, okay, I can see this opportunity now. And they went back to their organizations with a new sense of ownership for the possibilities this project had to offer, and a new motivation and confidence, actually, to adopt small little changes to their everyday work and actually just see what happens. And so I think what unites us in this project is that everyone sees the value in investing in change, and they understand that therefore you have to let go of established paths. Even if the steps you can take are only really, really small steps and are sometimes really frustrating to go, by embracing the international discourse we are offering with this project, you can gain a boost to any kind of transformation, either personal or organizational. So the international collaboration becomes a motor, it becomes the catalyst for this transformational change. But this also required an openness to different perspectives and a confidence to make brave decisions. In the cultural sector, especially the publicly funded one, where change seems to be sometimes take longer than in other sectors, this is still a very novel trait. But sometimes we also had to accept, during the 4 years, that co-funded projects don't always leave enough room for change themselves. You naturally, as a funded project, have to work towards a set goals of outcomes defined in any grant application you're writing. And even experimental projects like ours have to fulfill this proclaimed need to forecast the outcome down to the last bits and dates and everything, which is a really, really tricky task, taking into consideration that we get the impression that the sector itself does not yet know how to even measure the value of change properly. And also, it became clear that working on an international project within established organizational processes can be a limiting factor too. Working on smARTplaces sometimes felt like working on a different planet than the rest of the organizations. In a project environment, you always face the challenge that projects are naturally add-ons, somewhat unknown entities somewhat unknown entities that add to the already existing really huge workload everyone faces who works in the culture industries. And therefore, they are the first thing that attention gets drawn away from when things get busy, teams change, or departments get reorganized. What I realized during these 4 years that projects not only need dedication, inspiration, and trust, they also need a fundament outside the project structure. They need an internal support system and an organizational structure that enables conceptual growth even from the middle management on. It also requires new leadership models that leave room for experimenting, for learning, and yes, for failing as well. Models that also see the value in anchoring this knowledge in a sustainable way across multiple departments, not only that department that is responsible for the project. So one key question that remains is how can these projects successfully integrate into the existing structures and organizational culture? The obvious answer, it's hard. smARTplaces didn't change our organizations. We can admit to that. But it impacted audiences in us, and it did change mindset, it did change workflows, and it became a starting point for these internal discussions. We already mentioned that. We didn't coordinate our talks, just to make sure. And it became the starting point, and it became a catalyst for the transformation process that will live on, and I'm very, very certain on that. And I believe this is the most sustainable outcome this project could have ever reached. I would like to close this note actually with my biggest personal learnings from the last 7 years. The very human experience we shared were also for me a lesson in humility. I had to realize that as a coordinator, you will never live up to all the expectation and great ambitions you initially had. The nature of project works means that you are always the most annoying person in the room and in the project. Whenever I contacted partners, they knew in 99% of the times I needed something from them. You know what happens. So in between chasing deadlines, the months between our bi-yearly meetings sometimes felt like working in a little bit of a vacuum, where we lost a little bit of traction as well. Realizing that the project will always have a greater meaning to myself than to all other partners is quite tough. And that even the best and detailed project plan in Smartsheet doesn't mean anything, because at the end, it's still just a project for everyone else and will never have the top priority. So the greatest learning was to let go of these formalities and control and really trust in the competencies of my colleagues across Europe. And that when we meet again, this trust will be paid off with new energy to keep on working together, a fresh drive that would last another 6 months until the next meeting. In the end, project management means a lot more than just coordinating tasks or communicating or finding a common ground. The respect and sympathies we have for each other in this project, and I think you got a really, really good glimpse of that here, is what makes this international team so unique and special and probably one of the best teams I've ever worked with. And that, and what everyone accomplished during these last 4 years, is what makes me really, really proud of this project. Thank you. Yes, and together with Jasmin Vogel and Kurt Eichler, we three are what you can consider the smARTplaces dinosaurs a little bit. I would like now to continue the conversation and hear about their learnings and their thoughts on how you can actually anchor complex international projects like this in organizational structures and what advices they have for future projects of this scale. So, Jasmin, you initiated the project during your former role, as we heard before, and brought together all these wonderful people back in the days. With this first idea for this project arising in 2013, now 7 years later, looking back, what is your key finding from the project?
I think I stated it at the spotlight that first you do a project because you think it's so much needed, and of course it is important, and in the end you realize how important it is that you really focus on people and that you have to like people in order to do such a project, basically. So it's not about, as Jana said, oh, it's digital and digital is the technology and will help us too. No, it's my mindset which helps. So you need a common sense and a common ground of an understanding how you want to work and how you can reach your communities, basically.
Thank you. Mr. Eichler, you laid the organizational fundament for this project and are still a friend critical friend of the project and observer, what would be your key finding?
Yes, I think my key finding is especially a finding according to the role of digital content today. I think until we started Smart Places, we thought that digital tools are only maybe for marketing, for ticketing. But I think as people today also have a kind of a second digital level, this content of institutions also must find a connectivity to the people's mind. That means also our content has to be on a digital base or within digital formats, and this is my most important knowledge about this Smart Places project. Because before I also have seen it in another way. And I think also the concrete findings in the different cities and different institutions show us that we cannot divide today between the operational and the content means of the digital age. It is one thing, because also I think in a lot of people and a growing number of people also don't make a division between this normal life or this analog life and the digital life. It's more complex and more different, and that means also we need new access to this topic.
You made a really good point that we haven't talked about that much today, I think, how important creating valuable content is and how much we all struggle with this. The best technology can't really do anything for us or for the audiences or really deliver new experiences with culture and art if you don't know how to tell the story and know how to work with this content. Jasmin, where do you see some more limitation or challenges in collaboration projects in these regards?
I think it's definitely the structure of cultural institutions. So we have, I think, the challenge that most cultural institutions are very hierarchic. And this leads to, if we want to collaborate, we need a totally different structure. And then it comes, well, there are two mindsets that come together, and then of course you are in conflict, because on one side, in order to produce good content, you need to collaborate, but the structure doesn't allow this. So for me, the big question is, how can you change basically our cultural work and how we work, and transfer it to a structure that is suitable to the content that we need to produce. Is this clear what I mean? Or should I explain it more? Sometimes I have the feeling I'm just...
What do you think, what kind of structure it would need?
Well, collaboration means that you can work interdisciplinary, that of course there are hierarchies, but you are able to step out of your role. So this means questioning yourself, like we say, humbleness. Now, this is not a therapy session where I'm really on this humbleness, but I think it's very important. If you want to deal with communities, we need to understand these communities. And therefore, if I'm not part of the community, I can tell what they feel. And it's about feeling. And content production is not, oh, I have a nice concept. So, and I think so, therefore, what cultural institutions are strongly needed is doing daily business, change their structure according that they are able to collaborate. Because what I learned in Smart Places is we collaborated at the very first stage. This was collaboration, but not true collaboration in its sense, because the structure, you're not able to do this.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point, because I think in the 4 years of Smart Places we did a lot of improvisation.
Which is good.
In an ideal project world, what do you think, how do you manage to link your efforts in international collaborations with the resources available? How could the ideal process look like there?
Yeah. Oh my God. To cherish the art of improvisation, because you can't plan this. You can't plan a project, like you said, having a big project planned for 4 years, always things are happening. And I think the ability to anticipate is the most valuable thing here. And in an ideal world, if to say this, if you work internationally and do a project like this, it has to be accepted by all team members, and not just the team members, but the directors. And a lesson that was hardly learned is how to communicate such a project where not everybody is taking part. And so in ideal world, you have the right communication floors to have the right collaboration culture. And of course, you've got... Punkt.
Mr. Eichler, after you left the cultural department of Dortmund and the Dortmunder U and went on to work as a senior advisor for cultural policy making. From your experience and perspective, what roles do projects like ours actually play in the development of innovation strategies in cultural institutions?
That's very difficult to answer because, there are successful projects and there are also projects who don't run, who fail. And so I think it depends on the specific situation of a project within an institution. I think there are some success factors that projects can run very good and bring also some transformation to the institution itself. I think the first one is, if you remember that our cultural institutions normally have a very long tradition. They have staff that are specialists, maybe art scientists are working in art museums, the librarians in the libraries, and so on. And I think we need more mixed teams in these institutions because to open the mind of the institution itself, so that they get other perspectives, not only a perspective of the specific profile of the institution, but also to get a view to other problems and also to find connectivity to collaborations with other parts of community, but also with other institutions, also abroad. And this is very, very important because, every country has its own traditions in running an institution. And I think one of the main outcome of Smart Places is that all participants learned how institutions how similar institutions can be run in different ways in different countries. And I think this is very important. And for me, in my own career, it was very interesting, for example, to see how institutions run in the United States or in Great Britain or in the Netherlands or in Scandinavian countries. I mean, this is quite different from Germany. And I think an advantage of these institutions in other countries, it's, according to my opinion and my experience, they are more agile than the institutions in Germany. Because in Germany, institutions are part of administrations normally, of state or of local administrations. So they have the same regulations like a graveyard, for example, or street renovation or whatever. So it's very, 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 very complicated to go out of these structures. And so one recommendation I can give is to bring these cultural institutions outside the normal governmental structures. So to find possibilities that they can act for themselves and according to the needs of the institution and the people who are addressed by this institution. So mixed teams, outsourcing, yes. And I think also international exchange is very important for institutions, but I think also that think over the internal organization of an institution. Must it be a hierarchy, or can you constitute maybe power teams or idea funding, think tanks, for example? I think this is very important to struggle against these overwhelming structures we normally have in the institutions. They are small steps, but I think they are successful for a living and a vibrating institution.
You just mentioned the need for more agile and more flexible leadership models as well, yeah. And how to organize and structure cultural institutions as well. If you work in a co-funded project or a funded project as well, I mentioned this earlier, you are limited in the degree of agile working you can apply to the project. How do you think with funded projects, how can they gain more flexibility when concepts change or when new findings actually make you realize while you're already working in a project that you have to make these adjustments to be on the path and to create really valuable outputs with this project?
Yeah, I think this is one of the main problems of projects who are going to explore some innovation or experimental ways or results. I think there are also some possibilities, but I think they are very limited. So normally you can define some sources of money like risk funding, for example. That means the result is not defined. If you apply for fund or for funding. Another way may be that inside a project financial sheet, you can define a so-called experimental corridor or funding corridor. That means for this money, it's not really defined at the beginning what is done with this money. So it's inside the project. Another possibility is, and this is very widespread in the Netherlands or in Great Britain, are these so-called arm-length organization or funding organization, like funds, for example. So they are kind of a buffer between the initiative, the project, and the state administration who has to give the money. And so there is more flexibility also in adjusting a project during the running time of the project. This is also a possibility. And I will refer to another example here from North Rhine-Westphalia. Also in 2014, we released a state law on culture, on funding for culture, for arts and cultural education. And in this law, we could bring in a special so-called experimental paragraph. And this says, if I get funding, state funding for a project, this project can fail, and this would not have the results that I have to pay money back. That means that a small organization, for example, is bankrupt. So these are some things, and I think also these models can be implemented on a local level too, if the politicians, if the government wants to do.
Jasmin.
Yeah, I would like to add there. I think it's also maybe just to add to the first point you made, the question of how can you have an agile organization or bring agile innovation into an organization. I think it's a leadership question. So you need, I call it 80-20, 80% daily business, 20% content. Content discussion, time to experiment, money to experiment, and the possibility to fail. And also not saying, oh, it's nice, all the creative people can be part of this. The administration has to be part of it. Because we have administration usually is like this, and hierarchy, and like this in this hierarchy, it's used that they're reporting upwards. And if you work creative, oh, I just don't want to report anywhere. And I think it's important to have a structure or to give the opportunity to experiment with hierarchies. And thinking of how can we learn through collaboration and develop an organizational culture that is that supports this. But this is nothing that can be decided on the marketing department or by the controller. This is something that in the end, leaders of such organization need to want. If they don't want, if they want hierarchy, then in the end, you won't be able to collaborate, basically.
It's a very interesting. May I please respond? Yes, I think it's very interesting because when we founded our cultural administration, our cultural department, we redefined it in 1995 and built up a new structure. And this was a period of decentralization of responsibilities inside the communities and inside the local governments. Nowadays we have another tendency. It's going back to the roots. Yes, you know. But then we had the principle that we decentralize responsibilities also for budget. That means not the chief executive officer or the other levels of leadership decided, but the people who have been very near and very close to different duties and to projects, they have to decide about the money. And this was very good model. And I think also the motivation of the people who work in such an organization is much higher than they have all to go up to the chief executive and ask them, can I spend maybe 1,000 euro for whatever? So, but this is a problem because in Germany we had to roll back in this strategy, and also what you said, to fail is possible. When we made our announcement to our council to bring in our new model of organization, there was one big sentence about everything. We can fail. Maybe we can fail with everything, and we will fail, and we will make failures, and they accepted it. So I think this is very important also for the internal culture of an organization to keep this in mind.
Now I have an add-on question. By allowing projects to fail, do you already think that with failed projects there is a real evaluation process of this failure? So that you can actually really learn for future projects?
I hope so. I hope so. But I think also a project that fails has some very interesting and one very interesting results for other projects and for the institution itself. I think we don't have any project that really fails completely. So maybe some goals you cannot reach, or some results are not so as you expected, but you will have a content that is valuable for the organization. And also failures are very relevant because you don't do these failures once more.
But isn't it usually in the project work that you fail and you face this failure as well, but you don't really communicate it. It's very quickly forgotten and no one really talks about this. Do you think we are on a way to head to more openness to talk about our real experiences and failures? And would that be one step on how to improve future projects?
Well, I think in general, of course, there are fucked up parties. So I think there is, yeah. I mean, so there is a culture already to communicate failures. But I think there's one thing we said is honesty. And when is a project failed? So I mean, come on. You always learn from processes. And you learn it as a team, you learn it as an organization. And yes, I think it's important to have a transparent process from the beginning on. And this is one, let's call it mistake, we did in smARTplaces from the beginning. We thought, oh, we need to develop a concept, and then went to all the partners and asked, you want to take part? It was the wrong start. But this was a learning. If I do a project now, I never start with a concept, I start with the people. And we develop it together. And this was a huge step for me in person, but it's also a huge step for institution itself. And Art of Skate, I think, is the best example for it, to have a beautiful exhibition that had a meaning, was valuable, because you learned from, oh, don't start with the concept, start with the people.
I was about to ask you to give your last words to the project, but I think it already summarized it very well. So thank you, Ms. Eichler, Jasmin, Vogel, for your insights and learnings from this project. I think what has become very, very clear during this day, that there are a lot of different approaches, that there are a lot of young talents who are now thriving, who will actually help in creating organizational change as well, who will leave their marks and their own impressions on the project work for future projects, and that projects like smARTplaces open up these new avenues of collaboration, of networking, that we are actually within a project that will keep on working together even if the project ends, and that these the connections with people we made are one of the most valuable outcomes we have here. And so before we end this very interesting day, and I thank you very much for your attention and staying all the way, I would like to personally thank a couple of people. There are a lot, so please excuse me if I forget anyone. Yeah, first and all, I wanted to thank my partner in crime with the overall coordination of smARTplaces, Jenny Müller again, also for a great job in organizing this conference. And next to her hiding, Apaya Adhikari, for his great work in curating, I think, a very innovative conference concept. He has become actually part of smARTplaces project, so the 10th member, I think, and a very critical friend. I also would like to thank my amazing partners from the 8 institutions that are here and made their way. Thank you so much. And I would also like to thank all the partners that couldn't be here, all your team members, your local team members, who really, really dedicated so much time in implementing what we actually created 5 years ago. So that was a task. And I also would like to thank all the people that actually made this conference happen today. I would like to thank the cinema team, Andy, Susie up there, for their great job. Woo! I would like to thank Dominic and his team from Our Bone for the live stream that actually was streamed in 2 languages today and also simultaneously translated. So thank you to these very professional people here who helped us do this conference. And I would like to thank Janis Kötting, Hester Gesonius again for their social media coverage today. And all the people you have met in person outside here, our colleagues from the administration, from human resources, from the front house staff, our social volunteers, everyone who pulled together today to make this conference happen. And I would also like to thank Florida Brand Design for the great support in the workshop in the last weeks and the really, really nice conference design they created for us. So thank you for them as well. And last but not least, Corey, our puppet master for today. Thank you very much. And you can have the last word.
Oh no, there we go. That's a wrap, hey? We're finally at the end of an incredible day. I mean, from speaking on the phone with Jewish grandmothers to illustrating homesick veggies, it's been a hell of a day, don't you think? It's been absolutely brilliant. Over the 4 tracks of identity, belonging, access, and acceptance, we've heard a lot of red threads about being approachable for our audiences and our teams alike, being multidisciplinary, needing to speak multiple languages. Juan said brilliantly, we need to speak human. I loved that bit. Being participatory is key, being humble, having empathy, and not being afraid. And I promise you that's the last you'll hear of me for the rest of the evening. We are going to take a little breather now. Thank you so much for joining us for the day. At